We all know that using the train over road vehicles is generally considered one of the more greener forms of transportation. I almost lost count the other day of how many drivers I saw that were using their cars with no passengers on the main road as I was walking down it. It was easily a coach's worth and would have taken more or less 50 to 60 cars off the road. I'm a bit of a devil's advocate as I don't drive, so public transport is my only way for me to get around. But don't get me wrong, trains and engines all leave their mark on the planet too. It's a lesser impact, but it's definitely there. Of course, we'll always research into new power options, maybe take power from nuclear energy, use hydrogen, or offset the carbon footprint with a solar farm, or maybe even use wind power. But before I digress, let me introduce you to Charles Easton Spooner. Charles was the secretary and engineer of the Festiniog Railway Company from 1856 to 1886. Charles's father, James, was primarily responsible for the building of the Festiniog Railway. He surveyed the site and aided in its construction. Although he had no engineering background, his work, aided by a man called Thomas Pritchard, proved to be very successful. He was so good, in fact, that he was appointed the railway's first ever manager. It was an appointment he kept until he passed in 1856. Charles had assisted his father in the construction, and Thomas took a liking to the lad and took him under his wing. From there, Charles was introduced to Joseph Locke and Islamabad Kingdom Brunel, and he learnt from them. By the time he'd finished his training, Charles had become a competent and capable engineer. Charles was appointed treasurer in 1847 and took over his father's job upon his passing. Under his leadership, Charles established the Boston Works and turned its blacksmith forge into a leading railway workshop, one that is still open and servicing engines even today. It was under Charles's leadership and tenure that steam was being introduced to the Little Line. Steam engines had never been tried or built for narrow gauge lines, and many designers thought the idea was not practical. Charles replaced the rails in readiness and asked Charles Menzies Holland to create an engine. Holland took on the task with great gusto and designed not one, but 4 little engines. Seeing how well they performed, Charles asked for more engines and soon commissioned Robert Francis Fairley and George England to build more. Charles now had his fleet, but he needed a way to inspect the line and see his fleet in action. He could use a horse or even a locomotive, but he didn't want horses over his line, nor waste coal on an engine that could easily be working. I don't know what prompted his bizarre idea. Maybe it was his love of boats, maybe because a schooner was named after him, but in a move that would make modern day health and safety experts have a fit, he created this, the railboat. It is as it looks. It's a boat on metal bogies. The bogies were Spooner's own innovation and a world first in using cast iron. The body would hold about 3 to 5 people, and the sail is operated exactly how you would operate if you were on water. The boat, as it was affectionately called, when it was not in use as an inspection engine, was used as a private conveyance for the Spooner family. It was reported to have reached an impressive speed of 27 miles an hour, and it could be towed up the line by an engine, then used a mix of gravity and the sail would be propelled back down the line. Sadly, the original boat's life ended rather violently. Charles was travelling with some members of his family on the downline when he disobeyed the rules for the train staff working. He crashed into the upline passenger train, turning his boat to tinder. Luckily, his family survived, having bailed out when seeing the train bearing down on them, but they were badly injured. The boat was never rebuilt, and the only reference to the boat was an old engraving, a photo, and a text description. Fast forward to 1998, when Festiniog's former archivist and chairman, Michael Seymour, passed away. In his passing, he left a simple instruction with a sum of money to the Festiniog Railway: rebuild the boat. The project was a difficult one. There were no plans. There was only the engraving, the photo and the text, and the team at Boston Lodge really wanted to bring Michael's last wish to life. It took 7 years and a mix of both professional boat and rail builders, but the boat was recreated and unveiled to a shocked public at Railfest in 2012. But was it the only one? Well, not really. There have been other examples of railboats. The Spurhead Railway would regularly use cars powered by the wind to move both people and artillery as part of its war effort. The twin bogies would actually survive the war and were originally built by lifeboatmen. They had no brakes and were simply stopped by dropping a piece of timber under the wheels. When not on duty, it would offer rides to people who would simply sit on the decking. They were quite nippy going up and down the line, although they were prone to toppling over in high winds. There were other drawbacks too. If the wind was too low, then they had to be hand operated. And there is a few embarrassing moments. One when a group of soldiers had a little too much of the devil sauce and ended up falling asleep on the decking. What they failed to notice was that the sails were unfurled and the wind had picked up. Luckily, one of the soldiers woke up just in time to stop the runaway cart before it careened through the barracks gates. And another time, an unfortunate bride and her newlywed were taken quite literally for a ride when the wind picked up as they were being escorted from their nuptials. The helmsman lost control, panicked and jumped off, with the groom following seconds later. The poor bride held on for dear life as she careened down the track, only stopping just before the fort gates, just as the wind died off. Not the best way to start a marriage. The military sail bogies were sadly replaced with a Raleigh 350cc side valve engine and gearbox, and sadly it was destroyed in its trial run when it ended up under a truck due to some badly set points. So can wind power a train? Obviously not today, but in the past, maybe? Wind sail cars were reported as early as 1829 in the States, so who knows how many were out there. I'm not sure if I would have been brave enough to dare to have a go, but they're certainly interesting. Spooner's replica car has toured the country and is a regular at the Festiniog, and is still in active service and can actually be seen running, as long as the wind picks up.